Jack, a young politician, sits alone at night after losing the election. He should be the president now, but instead, he plays with a coin in his hand, watching the night sky in silence. He sees something irregular to our eyes, a comet-like figure cutting the night sky. When the morning comes, he and his wife, Maggie, go to the airport. They intend to go away from the city to an old family lake house in Georgia to grant themselves a romantic time after enduring a great deal of stress. As they arrive at the airport, we understand that the action is set in the far future, where self-driving planes are flying passengers. Maggie, despite their mutual agreement to avoid the media at all costs, looks at her phone, worrying about the incident involving Jack's screaming that resulted in a little girl's hearing problems. It's a hilarious political farce, and Jack wants none of it here in the South, where people don't even know who they are. He says this out loud, and to his misfortune, the man in front of them recognizes him right away, imitating his screaming artistically. As they are driving to the final destination, Jack convinces her that great romantic days are ahead of them in a solitary house beneath the starry sky, hidden in the woods, away from the people who might bother them. It's a perfect opportunity to cool off, to forget about everything. As they arrive at the house, Jack realizes that it has not changed from the outside at all. However, as Maggie points out, the house hasn't been taken care of in a long time. They make their way into the living room, and the sight and the smell bring back so many memories of his teenage years to Jack. As Maggie leaves him alone to his thoughts, he goes around the house, checking old shelves, remembering, and finds a moving picture of his younger self with a girl named Elise, his teenage girlfriend. He scrolls to other images, smiling, but before he can sink deeper into this beautiful memory, Maggie goes up to him, and he lowers the picture swiftly. However, he is already caught and has to introduce his teenage lover to his current one. In the following scenes, they go around the house, inspecting all the deficiencies that the place has. Jack thinks he can fix some of them, but the years in politics stripped away all the other skills in him, so he says that his friend, Petrus, will have a look at it instead. At night, in a dimly lit kitchen, they prepare a canned ravioli, and for the first time, we see a glimpse of agitation under Maggie's forced smile. However, she breaks into laughter as Jack himself tastes it and finds it terrible. He wanted everything to be perfect and has been trying his best to make it so, and Maggie so far seems to be inattentive to his efforts, so he snatches the plates from the table and goes to the sink in cold silence. Maggie's attitude changes in an instant. She realizes that her husband needs support, and so, they get closer to each other, and the dim lights seem more romantic than unsettling. The next morning, when they are out grocery shopping, Jack notices Elise, the girl in the picture, standing alone, looking as if the time hasn't been ticking for her at all. The sight of her stuns him for a second. He stands there, looking at the image of a girl, when his blood starts steaming ferociously as if he was younger again. After a moment, he dashes away and follows her through the market, unable to take his eyes off her. Finally, after losing her, Jack crashes into her. Startled by her appearance, he asks her if she's Elise. The girl is confused. After a second, we see her face change a little. However, before she can fully remember who stands in front of her, Maggie calls for Jack, and their reunion is interrupted. Even when Elise is out of sight and his wife starts talking, Jack stands astonished, thinking that it couldn't be, she hasn't changed at all. In the afternoon, he reads an article about the colonists that returned from a 20-year-old space voyage in a holographic medium. After seeing Elise in the article, he swipes over the next page and tries to remain calm and untouched. In that instant, Maggie comes into the room, holding a hologram herself, smiling broadly as if last night's little incident changed her attitude for a long time. She's showing her friend around the house, and the three of them suddenly hear a honk. It's Petrus, Jack's friend. Old friends are extremely delighted to see each other after ages. After the small talk, Jack tries to start discussing Elise's voyage, but Maggie comes after him, and he moves aside disappointed. Petrus seems like a great man, easy to interact with. Stealthily looking at Jack, he points out how many memories they have made in this house. It's been 10 years since the last time they talked to each other. However, Jack is so gripped by Elise's story that he starts talking about her right away after his wife leaves to get some wine. It seems like she was not supposed to have come back. She and her crew went into a space colony and had to come back. Their departure wasn't planned, and now the people who were involved in that space program returned unaged. Time flows differently during space travel. It's weird to say the least. However, before they can further continue this conversation, Maggie comes out with her wine and her customary broad smile. They discuss fixing the house and, despite Jack's lazy protest, go to the dock to take a look. Down at the dock, Petrus advises him to stay away from Elise. Only a couple of months have passed for her, and her passion for Jack most likely still lives inside of her. Besides, there's nothing Jack could say to her. Jack knows this is true. He has no counter-argument, and so, he stays silent, trying to fight off the urge to see her again. The urge screams too loudly, however, and to quiet it a little, he stalks Elise that day from his car. Elise is still 18 years old, still as beautiful and beloved as back then. The feelings that have been sinking inside Jack for 20 years start rising on the surface again. He's so gripped by this phenomenon that he has to speak about it, even to Maggie. In the following scene, as they run around the forest trail, He says that the space travelers shouldn't return to Earth. They are traveling near the speed of light, and because of that, time passes differently for them. If they come back, they are considered time travelers. Maggie gets tired and she needs to keep on running. Talking makes it no less easy, so she urges him to get to the point. And so, he tells her how the old girlfriend in the photo stayed a teenager after 20 years that didn't pass for her at all. She's still the same girl she once was. Jack expects her to explode, to get jealous, but this time traveling seems to spark only fascination. They should even invite her over, the space traveler, colonialists who distorted the flow of time. It's all extremely interesting for her and not at all worrying. But only, maybe, she should, and Petrus was right. Jack chooses his outfit nervously that day as if he was going on a first date. He's about to go to Elise's house to invite her over. However, we stop following him around for a while and are introduced to Elise herself. She's helping out his father, a sick man named Hank, trying to make him believe that he must stop destroying himself. The two might have a communication problem, since Elise seems like she's about to stop trying when there's a knock on the door. She looks at him, well-dressed and nervous. She recognizes him, just like she recognized him in the supermarket. The feelings that she had are still there, untouched and unbroken by time, and the impact of this visit makes it hard for her to talk. So she remains quiet, answering his chaotic questions with silence until she dashes forward and hugs him. After this, Jack hands her the asparagus that she dropped when they crashed into each other back in the store. She wasn't buying it, as it turns out, though. She works there, and this foolish attempt to be nice and witty amuses both of them. The ice breaks then, and Elise tells him how old he looks. The communication they have after that proves why they were once together. The chemistry is extremely evident even after time went on differently for one of them. Eventually, Jack invites her over, mentioning his wife, Maggie, and then we see Elise's face change swiftly, like the sun suddenly getting behind a cloud. However, she still manages to forcefully smile, and the date is set. When Elise gets inside, she leans on the wall, overwhelmed by this new information. One day, she had a boyfriend, and the next morning, she had a friend, 20 years older than her, looking like a married salesman. Jack is happier with this meeting, though. That evening, he arranges the table for 5. Petrus is coming too. He's a little nervous, and the thing he needs the least right now is to speak about politics that he left behind. However, Maggie comes in with Roger on the call. Roger seems to be his assistant, and he comes with good news. So Jack listens to it with the last of his patience and learns how they dodged a bullet. The girl with hearing loss turned out to be sick in some other way, in the way worse way. However, as Roger says, it doesn't matter now, since the competition is getting narrower, and it is getting easier to race for the government. Jack objects that people don't look at him seriously anymore after the yelling. However, Robert convinces him that it's over and urges him to decide by the end of tomorrow. And so, Jack might become a governor. He has a new path ahead. However, the past is gradually sneaking up on him from behind. In the following scene, they and Petrus are sitting in the living room when Elise and her father arrive. Hank has the same attitude toward him as ever, distant and almost loathing. After they shake hands and exchange verbal blows, introductions are made and the silence falls unexpectedly. All realize suddenly that there's not much they can say to each other, but the wine in Maggie's hands breaks the ice, and they make their way to the dining room. In the following scene, after Hank boasts about time and Jack's arrogant father, the conversation shifts to a completely different subject, the way the past lovers met. Jack puts it shortly, it was at the movies. However, Petrus doesn't let him get around it so easily. It turns out that he even wrote a poem about this meeting, and this news ignites Maggie's fascination that much more. And so, Elise starts telling the story of how she was counting her coins outside the movie theater to buy a ticket when someone bounced into her. The coin started rolling and rolling, weaving its way around and through people as if it had the mind of its own until it landed beneath Jack's feet. Jack's heart starts beating rapidly as the story is being told, and Maggie is more and more amused by it, until Elise mentions how Jack bought the movie ticket for her with that coin after he tried to give it back, like that can of asparagus. Maggie is still extremely curious, however, in a different way now. She shifts into her seat, asking more about this asparagus can, and after the story is told, the silence falls again. The air trembles with tension, but only for a heartbeat, until Elise asks Maggie how she and Jack met. It's a far simpler story, the one that contains no fiction and no secret machines of fate. They just met at a bar. However, as she continues talking, Maggie makes it clear that relationships aren't priced according to their beginning. They are valued according to the number of nights spent at the hideous motels, trying to build a life together. Elise is looking at her talk, and we can just see a slight glimpse of rivalry between the two of them. But before it can go any further, Hank burps and the laughter breaks, releasing the tension. Petrus gets interested in the details of the travel after that, and Elise starts her beautiful monologue, talking about how she fell asleep, falling into the unending nothingness and floating around like a child in her mother's womb. The way she describes the travel and the vastness of the never-ending mysterious space is captivating. We can see how Jack starts leaning toward her slightly, looking at her and smiling as if he was sinking into her words and her soul. It seems like Maggie notices it too, since she changes the subject abruptly to the colonies. Jack and Hank have a bitter conversation after Hank says how the bureaucrats ruined the whole mission, and the dinner ends on a sour note. In the following scene, Petrus and Jack are sitting at the table as Hank sleeps in the weirdest position. Jack seems to be eager to remain in contact with Elise since he offers Petrus to hire Hank as a helper. Petrus isn't quite fond of this idea, however, he goes along with it eventually. Meanwhile, Maggie notices Elise's friendship bracelet when they are talking in the kitchen. It turns out that it's a gift from Claire, her best friend in the past. They discuss the weirdness of the thought that they were once the same age, and the conversation keeps on going as they continue to speak about ordinary things until Maggie gets curious about her plans. Sentence by sentence, she starts to talk down on her as if she was a senseless kid. Eventually, Maggie uncovers her true intentions. She compliments Elise's pink dress but bitterly adds that the blush on her face makes it look like she's trying too hard. The woman lingers for a second and then exits the kitchen, leaving her stunned and desperate. Elise, overwhelmed by this drastic shift in her life, washes off the tears in the bathroom after that bitter conversation, while all the others are discussing the hiring of Hank. On her way back, she notices Jack's old paddleboard in the closet and mentions it as she gets into the living room with the others. She suggests that they go to the lake tomorrow, and after a brief consideration, the plan is set. The couple talks about Elise before going to sleep that night. Maggie points out that she must be still in love with him, while Jack feels sorry for her. It must be hard for Elise, but he concludes that she'll get over it, and the conversation ends swiftly. In the following scene, Elise and Jack are paddleboarding in the lake, while Maggie and Petrus talk about Jack's past. Everybody concludes that he hasn't changed at all. He's still as clumsy as ever. Back in the middle of the lake, Jack stops trying for a while, and they can talk, reflecting on the past that is so distant for Jack and so close to Elise. He tells her that 20 years have passed since he visited this town the last time. From the conversation that comes next, we find out that both of their dads played a role in Elise's departure and their separation. That's exactly why Jack hated his father, just like Elise hates Hank right now. However, Jack's fury isn't here anymore. Now he can see the past from a different perspective, from the perspective of his dad, who thought that Jack would easily get over his girlfriend, whose family had an opportunity. This sudden turn of the conversation upsets Elise. Abruptly, like a true teenager, she gets mad at him for getting over her. Jack tries to convince her that their relationship was as meaningful as it gets, and that it changed him a lot, but eventually, he gives up, saying that he forgot how to talk with teenagers. The gap between them is visible for the first time, as Hank says that a year was enough for him to get over her. Suddenly and decisively, Elise gets off of her paddleboard and disappears into the water. Jack gets more and more scared gradually until finally, after 30 seconds, she comes up. Irritated and upset, she says with a spiky tone that these 30 seconds were enough for her to get over him, and Jack's attempts to win her friendship back prove to be futile. In the following scene, Robert tells Jack and Maggie from the hologram looming over the table that tomorrow Jack will have the first interview as a candidate. He tries convincing him that it's a great opportunity to win the trust of the youth. He doesn't even have to declare his candidacy yet, so there's no real point to step back from it. But Jack gets irritated, turning off the hologram abruptly without even saying goodbye. Then he turns to Maggie. All they wanted initially was to take the rest from the hideous politics raging back in the city. Now she's trying to pull him back there so quickly, and he doesn't understand why. The reason is self-evident for Maggie though. Life doesn't stop moving if he wants to take a break, and it's a perfect opportunity to move forward and take a second chance. And so, finally convinced that he should take that step, Jack starts preparing for the next day's interview at night. He's sitting at the table, studying charts, when suddenly, Petrus and Elise knock on the window. They are going dancing and they have come to bail him out. Jack steps back for a second, mentioning his interview, but once Elise teases him, he surrenders and sneaks out of the house, trying to be as silent as possible. It's a far better chance to cool off before the interview, and he wants the old times back. So, stuck between the future and the past, Jack and his companions reach the club. Elise's age gives rise to a little confusion at the door, but they enter it eventually. There, in a steamy red room, a young college kid suddenly recognizes him. He approaches energetically, telling him that he's a hero of his for hating kids. The others take a picture of him, and this is the moment Jack understands his mistake. If this picture leaks, there are going to be problems for him. But this is no time to worry about the future, so he and Elise make their way toward the dancing floor to forget and remember and lose themselves in music. After a while, they take a rest outside on the balcony when Jack shows her the video of him screaming right behind the kid's ear. The video makes her genuinely laugh. She says that this is the Jack that she knows when Petrus comes up to them, talking of another party near the lake. So Jack is encouraged to get caught in the moment like he used to in the past, and follows them. There, Jack can't help but talk like a grumpy old man about his career, when someone from behind hands him a joint. He hesitates for a moment but then goes along with it anyway. It makes him cough uncontrollably. When he calms down, Elise mentions something that he said 20 years and 3 months ago. He said that he never would lie about who he is. Suddenly it all comes to him, that exact day when all they did was drive and talk all night, without anything else to do. And now, he's a politician doing the exact opposite, trying to become somebody that he isn't. However, he doesn't want to ruin the mood, so he chooses to avoid thinking about it that way. The rest of the time, Jack reflects on the past, remembering the way he was in college. Eventually, he tells her that 4 years spent there were lonely. It was extremely difficult to get over her. The night is perfect, but before they can continue talking, Petrus comes up to them again, saying that it's time for the fireworks. Fireworks are done differently. It's an artificial meteor shower, slowly and quietly rising from the sky. Jack, mesmerized by the view, looks at Elise and says that it's beautiful. He gazes at her, smiling, and we understand that she was the one he meant, more beautiful than the dancing light in the night sky, generated by a distant satellite. After a while, the show stops and Elise offers him to go on a stroll. Abruptly, completely immersed in the night's unexpected adventure, Jack agrees. In the following scene, they are walking beneath the woods, talking about what happens when one gets older. Jack, just like everybody else Elise met after coming back, tells her that disappointments come darting after one another until a once young kid eventually turns into a broken adult. Elise seems to have all the excitement of her youth still intact. However, there's no wisdom in her words, and all the points she makes sound so naive to Jack. The man in front of her seems changed, grown into something that she doesn't recognize. So sentence by sentence the gap between them gets wider and wider until Elise storms off, sitting at the shore. Jack approaches in silence. After he tries to apologize, Elise decides to tell him what truly bothers her. Everybody talks to her as if she was a kid trapped in time. But in truth, she feels like an old lady. Jack saw the way everything changed bit by bit, while she feels as if the past 20 years have passed for her too, only too fast for her to comprehend. Now she can't relate to anyone, she's out of place. And, as if it isn't enough, her sick dad weighs her down like a heavy burden. Nothing in life is the way it was before. Jack hears all this. Now he knows what he must do to make her feel better. He takes the coin out of his pocket, the exact coin that led him to her. This is evidence that some things stay untouched, away from time, and unrusted. It's love. And so, she leans forward and they kiss and break up again. Elise gets close again, saying that she loves him when Jack pulls away. He can't do this, neither can Elise. And so, after apologizing and stating all the reasons why this can't happen, Jack goes home anxiously, leaving Elise on the shore, feeling hopeless and desperate. Jack has to return to his life. The pretty dream must be over. He silently enters the house and wakes Maggie in bed. The next day, he takes part in the interview, talking as a true politician would, stating how much he cares for his family and the future children of this country. He mentions how sorry he is for the incident that was out of character for him. In short, Jack is doing the same thing that Elise told him yesterday. He's portraying himself as someone who he isn't. However, it all goes upside down when Karen, the journalist, starts showing the footage of him partying yesterday. It's great material to put him down and ruin his political career here on live television. But suddenly, something light in Jack's heart and he realizes that he no longer wants to be the character that everybody wants him to be. He will be a human being and not some artificial robot, made especially to win the elections. So he admits everything, saying that all this world needs right now is honesty, and the fact that a politician is partying and using bad language sometimes doesn't mean anything. He speaks from the heart, undercutting all the attempts of Karen to interfere in his monologue, and eventually, he storms off. The last days changed him. Maggie goes after him with a face full of contempt and confusion dancing on her face. She's furious at him for losing everything that they worked for. He acted like a teenager in her eyes. And the fact that he sneaked behind her back yesterday to party with Elise makes her even angrier. She knows whom he was thinking about last night, and unfortunately, Jack has no answer to this. It's true, he knows. Maggie then sits down, and as tears start coming to her eyes, she tells him how she felt when Elise told the story of the coin. She tried all her life to be the one Jack loved, but in the end, she failed. Jack tries to convince her otherwise, saying that he only needed to take a break from everything, but to no avail. Maggie just urges him to go, and so he does. In the following scene, Jack exits the house in quiet desperation. His face is full of sorrow. He sees Petrus unloading the truck and asks him to have a drink with him. While driving, after some jokes to lighten the mood, Petrus tells him that he took Elise home yesterday. He knows how Jack screwed up. Petrus knew this would happen, and so it did. Jack is angry at Petrus at first. One mustn't relive his past, he thinks. Nonetheless, he asked him to go out last night. But eventually, Jack realizes that it's himself he's furious toward. Jack Lambert, who failed to forget about his passionate and tender love dwelling in the distant past. He's grown, that much is true, but the young and bold person, who's selflessly in love with Elise, is still inside of him. Angry at this thought, he asks Petrus to pull over for a second. They get out of the car near the movie theater and go ahead to grab a drink. Meanwhile, Maggie is talking to someone over the phone, and from her expressions we suspect that something unexpected has happened. Suddenly, Elise enters the house, and Maggie hangs up the phone. It seems like Elise is looking for her dad. He's in the backyard as Maggie tells her, and the two of them make their way out of the house. Maggie's eyes and words are benevolent, but beneath the very thin cover, a bitter cunning is evident. She tries to convince her to travel at first and then adds that they have to leave this place too since the political work calls for Jack from the city. She also tells her that they are selling the place, a matter that she and Jack haven't discussed yet. However, it looks like she's trying to plant the seed of a quarrel between Jack and Elise. The teenage girl listens to her, rattling on how the last night was very helpful for the whole family, especially when they are trying to have a baby and Jack needs to cool off some steam. So, in short, a rain of spiky threats is pelting down from her mouth. And so, after Maggie spits one last cynical remark towards her and leaves, Elise gets to know that her father isn't there at all. As she storms off from the place, a single coin drops from her pocket and rattles on the blacktop. Back in the bar, Jack opens his heart to Petrus, saying that even though he loves Maggie, she always imagines someone else when she looks at him. Jack talks about his relationship, uncovering all the struggles to an extent that Petrus just goes ahead and says it. If Jack wants to be with Elise, he can just take the step and do it. In response to this, Jack sank into a melancholic flow of thought. He burned all the letters he and Maggie wrote to each other, cutting the mesmerizing song of their relationship right after it began. Now Jack feels a terrible urge to hear the rest of it, but eventually, he sums up that the marriage has gone too far. It's too late. He couldn't blow everything up in an instant and start a whole new life with Elise. That ship sadly has already sailed. His friend doesn't have anything against this, but he reminds Jack that if something were to happen, there's always that nuclear option. At night, getting near the house, Jack notices the coin, a symbol of his love, laying on the ground. He picks it up, knowing that it must be a sign. He enters the house and discovers Maggie's bags neatly stored at the entrance. She comes out, stating that they need to talk, but Jack begins first, trying to make her understand that he regrets his actions. After his speech is halfway done, Maggie thanks him and leans forward to say something else. Her eyes make us believe that Jack is reading the situation mistakenly. He continues talking though, asking if Elise was here today and continues conveying how committed he is to fixing everything in their relationship. Maggie says okay. She has something else to say. The person in front of him, talking from his heart, is not as important to her as always. She congratulates him, bringing the news that the interview has gone viral. Jack is universally loved now, so the bags are for both of them. They are leaving tomorrow. The next day, Jack goes up to Elise's house to say goodbye. He knows what it's going to be like. He tries to ask her for forgiveness. Regretfully, he adds that he wishes they were given a chance in the past. Then, Elise sees the opportunity to change his mind. She seizes it, saying that they are given a chance right now. But Jack responds plainly and coldly that the feeling floating between them right now isn't love. Neither it is fate, it's only a chance to hurt each other. And then, Elise confesses something very unexpected. She says that it is true. There's no fate, as it turns out. She tells him that back in the colony when they were choosing people that would stay, she switched her place with someone who wanted to remain in the colony. She did it for Jack, even though she knew that he would be much older once she got back. And so, now it's all clear for her. Fate is only a teenager's folly and nothing else. Jack is dumbfounded by this. As Elise turns back to get inside the house, he tries to make her stay so that they can talk about it. But once he lays his hand on her, Hank storms out from the door and punches him. There's nothing he can do, so, regretful and surprised, Jack turns back and goes away. The action continues 6 months later. Jack is on a call with Robert, babbling about the political situation and their next steps. Then, Maggie joins him and shows him a doll. It's Jack's, saying heck yeah every time someone pulls the spring behind its back. Must be an amusing sight for most people. However, Jack sees his fate in this doll, a soulless and hollow creature, talking only when he's asked to, in a way he is programmed to. His heart starts racing, so he has to go outside to let the fresh air cool him off a little. After a while, Maggie comes out behind him, bringing the news with a broad smile. It seems like she found a buyer for the lake house. And it strikes him, selling that house will be the last nail in his heart. He will not continue being a doll in the hands of other people. So, he decides to make it right, telling Maggie that he's not going to do any of this, including politics and their relationship. The last conversation between them is honest. They both know that this should have happened earlier, but Jack must stop trying to be someone that he is not. And so he does. In the following scene, he's already in the town, approaching Elise's house. His movement is energetic as he climbs the stairs, holding a large bouquet. The door opens, and he sees a stranger standing in front of him. She lets him know that Hank died a few months ago. Unfortunately, Elise's whereabouts are unknown to her. Jack fails to find her until he meets Petrus, who fills him in. Elise went to New Orleans, she moved on. But the man is a true friend. He promises Jack that he'll drive him to her tomorrow. So, in the following scene, their truck pulls over near a cafe where Elise works. Jack gets out, and as Petrus drives off, he stands there for a while, frozen in time. Then, we see Elise entering the cafe. We expect to see Jack, standing there with open arms, trying to make up for all the unused chances, but instead, to our surprise, we see Petrus. It's a letter. Once she opens it up in the next scene to see what's inside, a single coin slides down from the envelope. Of course, the letter is from Jack. And this is what he says. He thought he wanted to run back to her, to ask for forgiveness, explaining all the mistakes that he made while leaving her. but he realizes now that she must leave her life, just as he did without her. She must travel, make friends, be happy, and discover herself. In the meantime, he will be taking a trip to the colony, years forward, 5 years back. Jack will freeze the time for himself and wait, hoping that after a long time, their love will stay as strong as it always was. And then, he will wait for her in front of the movie theater, but until then, he'll see her inside his dreams, floating in the cosmos. And so, 10 years pass, and Jack sits in front of the movie theater. The whole day passes without a trace of Elise anywhere. At night, he takes his bag and plans to leave, but suddenly, the entrance lights up. He turns around and sees a single coin, spinning on its edge, making its way toward him. Jack takes it, raises his head, and sees her, standing there, letting him know that the story of their indestructible love is about to be continued.